You believe in that ending, don't you? You believe in that beach, that impossibly perfect blue sky, that white-haired man opening his arms on the Pacific shore while the camera pulls away, and that soft, almost weightless music fills every corner of your chest. You believe. And you know why you believe. Because you need to. Because the Shawshank Redemption spent decades teaching us that hope is the most real thing in the world. And we, sitting in the dark in front of a screen, chose to accept that lie with both arms wide open because the truth would be too much to carry. But today I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to lay out here is not a Reddit fan theory, not someone trying to tear down a movie everyone loves just to feel smart. What I'm about to show you is the most honest, the most raw, and the most painfully coherent reading of the Shawshank Redemption you're probably ever going to hear. And it starts with one simple question. A question that, once I ask it, is going to permanently change the way you see this film. Do you really believe that a system this brutally designed to destroy a human being from the inside out, a system that spent decades grinding an innocent man down, that humiliated, that brutalized, that reshaped every single cell of Ellis Boyd Redding's mind into the logic of stone walls and razor wire? Do you really believe that system was just going to let Red walk away and be happy on a sunny beach in Mexico? No, it wasn't. And that's why he never got there. What you saw at the end of the Shawshank Redemption is not a happy ending. It's the final dream of a dying man. It's the last burst of dopamine firing through Red's brain, happening in that same cheap hotel room where Brooks Hatlen hanged himself from the ceiling years before. Red never made it to the Pacific. Red died inside four walls. And his mind. His mind built paradise because the real world had already refused to hold him. Stay with me, because this is going to hurt, but it's going to make complete sense. Before anything else, I need you to understand what this film actually is at its deepest core. Frank Darabont didn't adapt The Shawshank Redemption as a story about hope. He adapted a Stephen King novella about what prison does to the human mind over time, and the answer the film gives to that question is devastating. Because the answer isn't that prison makes you stronger. The answer is that prison remakes you. It rebuilds you from the inside out in its own image. It turns you into something that can only exist within its own walls. And there is a scene in this film. One single scene. That is more honest about Red's fate than any frame on that godlit beach. And that scene is named Brooks Hatlen. Brooks lived 50 years inside Shawshank. 50 years. He went in young and came out old, came out with a cage in his hands and a bird on his shoulder and a shy smile on his face. And the outside world received Brooks Hatlen with the total and absolute indifference of a place that never knew he existed. He worked at a grocery store bagging items. He rode buses staring out windows with the look of someone seeing a foreign planet for the first time. He sat in the room the state assigned him and wrote a letter that is perhaps the single most quietly devastating document in the history of American cinema, telling his friends he could barely sleep because the world out there was too loud, too fast, too full, too alive for someone who spent half a century conditioned to the regulated silence of a prison cell. Brooks wrote that the world had gone and gotten itself in a big damn hurry. Sit with that line for a second. Let it settle. Because that is not the sentence of a man discovering the world. That is the sentence of a man realizing the world doesn't need him, that it never did. That time moved on, and moved fast, and left him behind as if he had never existed at all. And Brooks, unable to reinsert himself into a reality that had no space for him anymore, made a decision. He climbed up on a chair. He carved his name into the wood of the ceiling. And then he stopped existing. And here is the thing the film wants you to notice, but that most people miss because they're too busy waiting for the happy ending. Red sees exactly what happened to Brooks. Red knows. Red gives the most lucid and most terrifying speech in the entire film when he says that Brooks didn't go crazy, that Brooks got institutionalized, that Shawshank's walls first hate you, then tolerate you, then they need you. That Brooks's mind was so completely rebuilt by decades of confinement that freedom wasn't a gift anymore. It was a death sentence delivered slowly. And then Red looks at his own 40 years inside those walls, and the camera looks back at him. And if you pay attention, if you really pay attention in that moment, you realize that Red isn't describing Brooks at all. Red is describing himself. Red is stating, with the calm and resigned voice of someone who already knows the ending, his own diagnosis. He's telling us he was institutionalized too, that he was remade too, that the same walls that destroyed Brooks spent decades quietly working on him, and that when Shawshank's door finally opened for Red, what walked out wasn't a free man. It was the shell of a man who remembered who he used to be and had completely lost the ability to go back to being that person. Because that's what institutionalization actually does. It doesn't keep you locked up. It's smarter than that. It lets you leave, but it comes with you. Let's talk about what actually happens when Red gets out of Shawshank. Because the film shows it. And it shows it with a documentary precision that becomes genuinely disturbing once you stop romanticizing it and start watching. Red moves into the same hotel room where Brooks lived. That is not an accident. That is a narrative choice. Darabont puts Red in the same physical space where Brooks died because he wants you to connect those two lines. He wants you to see that these two men, separated by years, are walking the same path, following the same map to the same destination. Red walks the streets with that same lost stare Brooks had. He works at the same grocery store. He bags items with hands that spent decades inside a prison. And the young manager who barely looks at him is the perfect embodiment of a world that keeps moving without pause, without reverence, without any interest in who you were or what you survived. Red asks permission to go to the bathroom at work. He asks permission. After 40 years conditioned to need authorization for every movement of his own body, the reflex runs so deep, is so completely hardwired into his neurology, that he cannot even use a restroom without first checking with someone. And the manager looks at him with that expression of awkward confusion, and you might feel secondhand embarrassment in that moment. But the film wants you to feel something else entirely. The film wants you to feel terror. Because Red in that moment is not a free man misusing his freedom. Red is a human being who is conditioned to a cage, and who, even with the door wide open, doesn't know how to move without bars as a reference point. And there is one specific moment. A moment most people watch and find touching, but that is probably the most devastating single instant in the entire film, when Red is lying in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling, and narrates that he can't sleep without the sound of the guards walking the corridors at night. That the silence of freedom is more frightening than the noise of captivity. That he spent so long learning to sleep to that rhythmic sound of boots on stone floors that silence now feels like the absence of reality itself. The silence of freedom for Red is the silence of a vacuum, a place where he can no longer locate himself. And here I want you to pause for just a second. Not the video, in your head. Think about what I just described. A man who's afraid of silence. A man who asks permission to use the bathroom. A man who looks at busy streets the way you'd look at a storm rolling in. A man living in the same hotel room where another man, exactly like him, ended up dying. That is not the journey of someone who is about to cross an entire country by bus, illegally cross an international border, and arrive on a paradise beach in Mexico to reunite with an old friend. That is the journey of someone reaching the end. If you're into theories that flip classic films completely upside down and make you see them in a way you can never unsee, hit that like button and subscribe to Fractured Plot right now. And drop a comment telling me which side you're on. Do you still believe in the official happy ending, or does this theory hit too close to home to ignore? Because I genuinely want to know where you land on this. Now back to it. Red in that room is exactly where Brooks was, and he knows it. His narration is too honest to pretend otherwise. He talks about thinking of Andy, about the promise, about Zihuatanejo. And this is where we get to the most important layer of this entire analysis, the part that asks you to look at Andy Dufresne in a way you've probably never looked at him before. Who is Andy Dufresne to Red? The surface answer, the answer the film gives you on its face, is that Andy is the friend, the innocent man, the banker wrongfully convicted who spent 19 years planning his escape and finally crawled through a pipe and came out clean on the other side. Andy is hope made flesh. Andy is proof that the system can be beaten, that persistence pays off, that there is light at the end of the darkest possible tunnel. But there is another answer. And that answer starts making sense the moment you realize that Andy and Red are, in their essence, complementary opposites within the same story. Red is the man who was destroyed from the inside by the system. Red went into Shawshank as someone who committed a crime and came out, decades later, as someone who can barely cross a street without his body going into a kind of low-level panic. Red is what happens when time and walls do their work with patience. Andy is what Red needed to believe he could have been. The version of Red that wasn't bent, wasn't broken, wasn't rebuilt by the walls. Andy maintained his humanity intact inside a situation that shattered the humanity of everyone around him. He played music over the prison PA system. He got cold beers for the guys on a hot rooftop. He built a library from nothing. He studied, planned, acted with quiet, deliberate purpose, and in the end, escaped with the warden's embezzled money in one of the most cinematically satisfying getaways in movie history. Andy is impossible. And I'm not using that word casually. I'm using it with clinical precision. Andy Dufresne as a character is psychologically impossible to sustain as a realistic portrait of long-term incarceration survival. No research in the psychology of prolonged imprisonment, no study on the effects of maximum security confinement, no analysis of trauma and adaptation mechanisms suggests that a human being can spend 19 years inside a total institution under the conditions described in this film and emerge on the other side with his psyche intact, his cognitive resources preserved, and the emotional grace to write poetry-filled letters to a friend he left behind. Andy is a symbol. Andy is a construct. Andy is what Red's mind built over the course of decades in order to survive those walls. And if you want to go to the very deepest level of this reading, you arrive at a possibility that is almost unbearable to sit with. And the possibility is this: Andy Dufresne never existed quite the way Red describes him. Think about it. Everything we know about Andy, every single thing, is filtered through Red's narration. There is not a single moment in this film where we see Andy completely independent of Red's voice and perspective. Red is the narrator. Red is our only access to the world of Shawshank. And Red is a man who, by his own admission, learned inside prison to construct stories, to build internal narratives, to find beauty and hope in places where objectively there is none. What if Andy was real but far more fragile than Red tells us? What if Andy was real but broke the way everyone else broke? And what Red did over the years was build an idealized version of Andy just to keep himself from falling apart completely? What if Andy's escape was something Red rewrote in his own memory, turning a loss he couldn't survive into a victory he could hold on to? Or, going even deeper, what if Andy was completely real, escaped completely, got to Mexico completely, and simply couldn't wait? Because that's also a legitimate reading of this film. Andy made it to Mexico. Andy is fixing the boat. And Andy is counting on Red, an elderly ex-con with no proper documentation, no experience in the outside world after decades of confinement, and no real plan, to somehow make it across the continental United States by bus, illegally cross a border, and show up on that specific beach. Andy is waiting on a miracle. Or maybe Andy already knows, deep down, that Red isn't going to make it, because Andy was there watching while the walls did their work. But let's stay with the darkest version. Let's stay with Red in that hotel room. Red is lying down. The ceiling is there the same way it was there for Brooks. Cheap hotel wood with that particular texture of places that hold other people's quiet desperation. And I wonder if Red, lying in the dark, can make out the marks Brooks left. Brooks carved his name into that ceiling before he was gone. I wonder if those letters are the last concrete thing Red sees before he starts to dream. Because that's where the dream begins. Red narrates that he decided to violate his parole, that he decided to cross the border, that he decided not to be afraid. And his narration in that moment is different from every single second of narration before it. It's light. It's almost floating. It has an ethereal quality that the heavier, more resigned, more honest narration of everything prior simply did not have. And the camera goes to a bus crossing stunningly beautiful American landscapes under a light that looks painted on. And Red looks out the window with a smile, a genuine, wide, weightless smile that has never once appeared on his face in any moment of this film. rooted in the physical world. A man who couldn't cross a street without panic is smiling on a bus to Mexico. A man who asked permission to use the bathroom is smiling at roads he's never seen. A man who couldn't sleep because the silence of freedom was too frightening is smiling at scenery that never existed on any horizon he knew. Doesn't that shift feel too abrupt to you? Because it does to me. That shift is exactly the seam that shows when the dream begins revealing itself as a dream. When Red's brain, exhausted, desperate, alone in that room that smells like old wood and institutional disinfectant, and the ghost of Brooks Hatlen starts building the only exit it can still imagine, the Pacific. Andy described the Pacific to Red in a moment the film frames as almost sacred. Two prisoners in a stone yard, under a sky that barely let light in, and Andy talking about a blue ocean with no memory. Blue and without memory. And Red carried that image through years inside Shawshank like a talisman. Like a prayer spoken silently every night before sleep. Like the one thing that needed to be true for existence to make any sense. But think about what that description actually means when you stop romanticizing it and start listening. A place with no memory. Memory is identity. Memory is the thread connecting who you were to who you are. A place without memory is not a peaceful paradise. It's erasure. It's the dissolution of the self. It's what philosophers call the annihilation of consciousness. Andy didn't offer Red a promise of new life. Andy offered, without realizing it, a promise of a beautiful end. And Red, without realizing it, welcomed that as the most desirable thing in the world. Because Red's memory is a prison inside the prison. Decades of bars, of humiliation, of parole denied, of friends dead, of young men arriving and being destroyed one by one while he stood still, aging, surviving. A weight that no physical place made of sand and salt water could ever relieve. But a place inside the mind. A place the mind builds with all its love and all its grief in its final moments of full function. That place can be everything Red never got to have in the real world. It can be perfect. It can be blue. It can be without memory. And then the camera shows us the beach. And it shows us Andy fixing the boat with the calm of someone who never had anywhere to be. And it shows us Red crossing the sand, his pace quickening, and the two of them embracing while the ocean blazes behind them with an intensity that isn't photographic. It's emotional. And the light is insane. The light is supernatural. It's the light of a Renaissance religious painting, not the light of an actual Mexican beach at 3 p.m. It's the light of a vision, the light of an experience happening not through a camera lens, but behind the closed eyelids of a man who is leaving. Notice the visual quality of that final scene. Notice how different it is from the entire rest of the film's cinematography. The whole movie is dark, grainy, heavy, as if the camera itself is suffering alongside the characters. And then suddenly, in its last 2 minutes, everything is overexposed, too bright, too blue, too perfect. The texture of the real is gone. What's left is the texture of the deepest possible longing. This is not sloppy filmmakings from a director who ran out of time on set. This is filmmaking that is telling you, for anyone willing to hear it, that what we're watching has changed in nature, that we left the documentary and entered the dream, that what is being shown now is not the world as it is, but the world as Red needed it to be. And Red says, I hope. That is the last narration in this film, before the cut to sky and then to black. I hope. And we hear that word and we feel hope, because the film spent hours conditioning us to feel hope when Red speaks, when Red endures, when Red finds a way to make it through one more day. But what if I hope is not an affirmation of life? What if I hope is the last thing a mind can form before it stops forming anything at all? Red says he hopes to make it to the Pacific. But maybe what Red is actually waiting for is what he always waited for, quietly, in the deepest and quietest part of himself, ever since he watched what happened to Brooks. Permission to rest, permission to stop carrying, permission to arrive finally at a place that is blue and has no memory, and where the weight of decades of steel bars no longer weighs anything at all. And Red's brain, with the fierce generosity of something that loved deeply and was broken down to almost nothing and still never lost the capacity to imagine, gave him that permission, built the beach, built Andy smiling with that smile that was always too gentle to be entirely real, built the embrace, the boat, the endless horizon, the music rising slow. Built everything Red needed to leave in peace. I want to take a second to genuinely thank every member of Fractured Plot who makes it possible to go this deep. To spend this kind of time on an analysis that asks real questions about what cinema is actually saying beneath what it shows us. You make this work possible. Thank you. But I need to go one layer deeper, because there's a dimension to this analysis that most readings never quite reach with enough clarity, and it has to do with what Brooks's death means inside the film's larger narrative structure. Brooks didn't die by accident. Brooks didn't die of some vague, generic sadness that could happen to anyone. Brooks died of a specific, documented, studied condition that contemporary clinical psychology recognizes and names: post-incarceration maladaptation syndrome. The condition that strikes people who have spent so long inside a total institution, a system that controls every aspect of existence, every hour of the day, every physical movement, every permitted form of social contact, that the mind loses completely its ability to function outside that system. It's not weakness of character. It's neurological. It's structural. It's as concrete as a fractured bone. And Red, in the speech he gives about Brooks to the other inmates, demonstrates that he understands this with a clarity that would be impressive if it weren't so absolutely terrifying. Because Red is describing his own future condition with near clinical precision. And after describing it with all that clarity, Red continues existing inside that prison for more years. The walls keep working. The institutionalization keeps deepening. And when the door finally opens for him, Red doesn't leave any lighter than when he watched Brooks leave. Red leaves heavier. With 40 years of conditioned reflexes inside his body, an identity built entirely within a system that no longer exists to support it on the outside. And there is something the film does at this point that is cruelly honest if you're willing to look at it directly. When Red finds the box of money and the letter Andy buried under that oak tree in that open field, the film uses that moment as the emotional catalyst for Red's turnaround. As if a letter and some cash could reverse decades of mental conditioning. As if a friend's written word could do what simple free time never did for Brooks. And maybe that's exactly where the dream begins in earnest. Maybe Red finds the envelope. Maybe Red reads the letter carefully. Maybe Red sits in that field holding that paper like it's the only thing with actual texture in a world that's lost all its concreteness. And maybe, in that moment, something inside Red, something that had been holding on by a thread since he walked out of Shawshank, simply gives. Not violently, with exhaustion. And Red goes back to the hotel room, and Red lies down, and Red closes his eyes, and Red's brain, which spent decades learning to find beauty inside ugliness, which learned to imagine oceans inside stone cells, which learned to maintain sanity through internal narratives built with the care of someone working in total darkness, that brain does what it always did. It tells a story, and the story is beautiful. The story has a bus crossing America under that impossible golden late afternoon light. The story has Red smiling with a lightness that never existed on his face in any moment of this film, rooted in the real. The story has the border crossed with an ease that defies everything we know about the life of an ex-convict without proper papers. The story has the ocean appearing on the horizon like a sacred apparition. The story has Andy right there, exactly where he promised to be, with that supernatural light poured over everything like total absolution. Red's mind wrote the perfect final script for his last moments. And we, sitting on the other side of the screen, watched that script without realizing it was a script. We watched and felt hope, felt relief, felt like the story ended well. And the story did end, just not the way we think. There is a parallel I need to draw explicitly here because it is the anchor of everything we've said, and without it, this could all sound like speculation. The parallel is between the final narratives of Brooks and Red in the outside world, and it is so precise, so deliberately constructed by Darabont, that it is impossible to read as coincidence when you actually stop and compare them. Brooks, before he goes, writes a letter to his friends still inside, telling them the world out there is too big, too fast, that he can't find a place that fits him anywhere, that the only thing that made him feel something real was Jake the bird, and that Jake flew away one day and didn't come back. Brooks says he thinks about getting himself sent back to Shawshank. Brooks says he feels like he's been dreaming and might wake up back in his cell. Brooks, in the plain language of a plain man, describes exactly what psychology calls post-incarceration dissociative syndrome, a state in which the external world has lost all consistency and the only reality the brain still recognizes as true is the reality of captivity. Now listen to Red's narration in the outside world. Red says he asks permission to use the bathroom, that he can't sleep without the sound of guards in the hall, that everything out there moves at a rhythm his body doesn't recognize as safe. Red says he thinks about Andy, that the only thing anchoring him is the memory of Andy's promise. Swap the names, swap Jake for Andy, swap the bird that flew away for the friend who escaped. The text is the same, the trajectory is the same, the symptoms are the same. And if the symptoms are the same, and the hotel room is the same, and the loneliness is the same, why would the destination be any different? Darabont didn't put Red in the same hotel room by accident. It's an authorial statement made with full awareness. He's saying through the cinematic grammar of repetition, this is the same road. You saw where it led. Now watch where it's leading again. And the answer the film gives, if you have the courage to let it land without the protection of the happy ending you want to be true, is that it leads to the same place. But there's one more layer, and this one might be the most unsettling of all. What if Red didn't simply surrender to despair? What if Red, after finding Andy's letter, after holding that envelope with the money, after feeling for one brief instant the spark of something that might have been hope in a different life, made the only decision that was still fully and completely his? The decision to choose how the story ended inside his own mind. Red spent decades without control over anything, without genuine choice over any aspect of his own existence, every detail of his life determined by an external structure that decided when he slept, when he ate, when he could move, when he had to stay silent, when he was allowed any fragment of privacy or dignity. Red spent decades with his agency completely stripped by a system that existed to deny his humanity while pretending to rehabilitate it. And maybe, in the end, the one thing Red could do that was truly his, truly free, truly unreachable by any institution, was choose how the story ended inside himself. Choose the Pacific. Choose Andy smiling. Choose the embrace that compressed a lifetime of loneliness into a few seconds. Choose the supernatural light and the horizon that doesn't end. If that's true, then the ending of the Shawshank Redemption isn't exactly an easy lie. It's the rawest possible truth about what hope becomes for someone who has been stripped of everything that could sustain it in the real world. Not the rational expectation of a concrete good that will materialize, the human capacity to build beauty inside the deepest darkness, to write with the mind itself, the ending the world refused to give. Red didn't make it to the Pacific, but Red made it to the Pacific. And maybe that's where the most strangely beautiful and most quietly devastating truth of this film actually lives. Not on the beach, not in the embrace, not in the camera pulling away as the music rises, but in the quiet certainty that a man who spent decades having everything taken from him, in the end, had the freedom to build his own ending with his own materials, had imagination as the last and irreducible form of resistance against a system that tried to take that from him too. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you one final question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer it. If I'm wrong, if the ending is real, if Red actually made that entire journey, crossed that border, got to Mexico, and Andy was there exactly where he promised, and the embrace was real, and the light was real, and the ocean was real, why does the film end before they say a single word to each other? Think about that. You have two men who haven't seen each other in years. Two men who went through one of the most extreme shared experiences a human being can survive alongside another person. Two men with decades of friendship built inside an environment that destroyed every other friendship around them. Two men who talked about astronomy and geology and Rita Hayworth and Mozart and the music that exists in places where the warden can never get to it. And when they finally see each other after all of that, the film cuts. The camera rises, the music rises. We hear nothing. We see nothing of what comes after the embrace. We don't know what they say. We don't know what they plan. We just have the hug and the horizon, and then the movie ends. Why? Because there is no after. Because the embrace is the destination and the ending at the same time. It's the moment the dream reached everything it needed to reach and had nothing left to build. Dreams don't have realistic narrative continuity. Dreams have emotional climax, and then they dissolve. And that is exactly what happens. The camera rises, the light intensifies, the music swells, and everything dissolves into that vast blue space without memory. A blue place without memory. The rest, the erasure, the ending that felt like a beginning. This is the Shawshank Redemption scene without the protection of the romanticism we were taught to feel. It's a film about how the prison system doesn't just take the body's freedom. It takes the mind's capacity to want freedom without terror. It's a film about how hope, when cultivated inside a space of total despair for long enough, becomes completely indistinguishable from the delusion that makes survival possible. It's a film about two men who walked the same road and arrived at the same destination, separated only by how long each one could hold the weight before setting it down. Brooks couldn't hold it long. Red held on longer. But Red arrived at the same place Brooks did. And Zihuatanejo. Zihuatanejo is the most beautiful and most quietly heartbreaking thing the human mind has ever invented for itself inside a piece of cinema. Proof that hope doesn't vanish when reality denies its possibility with force. It transforms. It deepens. It becomes a fiction so dense, so absolutely necessary, that the brain presents it as more real, more vivid, more saturated with light and color than anything the physical world still has to offer. Red didn't believe in the happy ending. Red needed the happy ending. And that difference, that small, almost imperceptible difference between believing and needing, is everything. It's the entire distance. It's the space between a man who reached the Pacific and a man who died in a hotel room with the smell of old wood in the air and the name of Brooks Hatlen carved in the ceiling above his head. Drop a like and leave a comment right now. I want to know where you land after everything we just went through together. Can you still look at that beach the same way? Or does this feel too true to look away from? See you in the next one.